being a chief guest of today's session and a keynote speaker of today's session. Today, we are going to talk about his creative initiative of friendly water. And for all of us who want to live with the idea of Gandhian, David H. Albert is a kind of reference personality for all of us. He has trained as an academic in Oxford University. The kind of conviction he has for Gandhian thought and Gandhian praxis is remarkable. He has more than 40 years of experience of working with Voiceless Voice. He was part of Land Reform Initiative. He has been in many times in India, participated many social movement, Gandhian initiative. He has also written more than 15 books on nonviolence theory and practice. His book, People's Power, Applying Nonviolence, brought together pointers in how to make practical use of the theory of nonviolence in social and political conflict situation. Today we are discussing his initiative on the very special day. Today is death anniversary of Jayaprakash Narayan, who was a kind of person who invoked the idea of Gandhi, and he gave the idea of Sarvodaya and the kind of creative initiative movement for all of us who want to live with Gandhi's idea, Gandhi's thought, Gandhi's thinking. Jayaprakash Narayan helped us to move ahead from the line of Gandhi. The very important saying, it says, the best way to find oneself is to lose oneself in the service of others. When we think about David Albert's initiative for empowerment of society, this line is very, very true for him. So for giving a kind of brief introduction to the topic of today's Swadhyay Sachak dialogue, I request Ananta Giri, who is nurturer of Gandhians or Swadhyay Sachak circuit. I extend a very warm welcome. I can see so many important persons. MD Chandra Sahab, Minati Pradhan ji, Professor Mohanty, Professor Gyan Gloi, and all friends, all the viewers both on Facebook platform and Zoom platform. So for giving a kind of brief introduction of the topic, I request Ananta bhai to share some of his thoughts.
Thank you, dear Randhir. And thank you, dear David, and all friends who are present. We feel the immortal presence of Jayaprakash Narayan, who embodied the sadhana and struggle for people's power. And in the context of water today, in the context of, for example, commodification of water, the very language of friendly water, water as friend, and being friend with water, and offering ourselves to water. So that friendship is a call for offering, because the water is foundation of our life. And just 5 hours ago, I happened to meet a very inspiring sister here, David, and her name is Edith, and she has been a public communications person. And she told me how over the last many decades, she has been performing ceremonies with water. And one of the ceremonies that she does is to bring women to water and worship the goddess of water. As you work in Congo in the very difficult circumstances, and these two things are related, destruction of natural resources, including commodification of water, we need to bring a sense of practical reverence to water. And that reverence to water is through the sacrality of water. And that sacrality is embodied through varieties of cleansing water from the capture of capital control. And in agrarian systems, for example, we know the conflict between the people in the river, in the upper and the lower. So all these challenges we need to address through our sadhana of friendship. And in this case, friendship begins with a sense of surrender to water. And becoming friend with water, we co-create creative flows. And I offer these few lines of poem called Creative Flow, turning around and a new tuning. How can we become creative? How are you so creativity? Creativity is so natural with you. Creativity is a flow in our lives. It gushes in our bodies and souls, in the routines and rhythms of our life. We look at each other with openness. We feel the dance of creativity. So flowing with water is to be water. And we become water and kind of overcoming varieties of blocks and blockages that we have made in our inner lives and our structural situations. With this, a grateful welcome to dear David.
I request, thank you, Ananta Bhai. And now I request David Albert to share his kind presentation. Over to you, David Albert.
I was muted. Thank you so much. I was muted for a minute. Namaskar, Swagata, Vanakam, Jai Bim. It is a pleasure for me to be with you today. I was mentioning that actually I knew JP. I was a very young man at the time, but I was working with Dr. George Willoughby at the time, and I met JP, and I was even part of a walk for democracy in the United States, working with JP and the Sawardia movement. So without any further ado, let me get to my talk. I want to change my screen so I can see things better. Let me see. No, I'm not there yet. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to dedicate this talk to Dr. Rudy Reiser. Rudy is a good friend of mine. Rudy is the chair of the Center for World Indigenous Studies. And the reason I'm able to do this talk today is because Rudy was scheduled to do a big international talk next Tuesday. And unfortunately, last Saturday, he had a very major heart attack. He's recovering, but very slowly. So I've been asked to pitch in and do his talk for him. And it's because of that that I was able to, I had already prepared a talk for today. So with great thanks to Dr. Rudy and blessings for his better health. Next slide, please. So friendly water for the world is our mission and statement. We train and equip communities with sustainable village scale technologies to safeguard and expand essential resources. Our vision is people able to lead healthy lives and free to plan for the future. And the key word there is plan. Our poor friends, the last man and the last woman, often have so many day-to-day challenges in their lives that they're not able to plan for themselves and their families and their communities. And that's very much what we are about. Next slide, please. Who we are, we're experts in village scale technology. We build knowledge and resilience. We activate community engagement. We embrace the dignity and strength and rights of all living beings. And we stand with the most vulnerable. Okay, next slide. A question that I'm always asking myself is, what is the right relation between organizations and people from the global north and those we seek to partner with? And you'll hear throughout my talk that theme runs through. This is a challenge for me. It's been a challenge for me for more than 50 years, and it's a challenge that continues. But I think I've learned a little bit along the way. Next slide. So I took this picture in 2012 in Western Uganda. This 9-year-old boy was taken out of school by his parents. Both parents had AIDS. He had to walk 4 kilometers back and forth twice a day to bring water back to his parents because they could no longer make the walk for water. And this was the best water he could find. Next slide. Same story, this time in Western Kenya. These children taken out of school, walking for water in Western Kenya. Next slide. Next slide, please. So, next slide. Okay, so this is in Ginger, Uganda. And these children you see here, this is school break, lunch break. And the children are let out of school to gather water to bring home to their families in the middle of the school day. And they have a 2-hour break and all they do is gather water, and this is the water they gather. That's what it looks like. Next slide. Next slide. So now I'm in Tanzania. This is my friend Wakamizu. This is her house. She's a Maasai in northern Tanzania. And if you think the situations I showed you already looked bad, you need to see these. Next slide. So the Maasai people are a very proud people. They are cattle herders, pastoralists, these are living in northern Tanzania. There's a story about how their land is now taken over for a pleasure hunting park by the Saudi Arabians. Not going to talk about that, but this is what they look like, a very proud and wonderful people. Next slide. The men, again, herding cattle. That's what they do. Next slide. Problem is, over the last 4 years, because of an extended drought, they've lost about 75% of their cattle. The women used to go out at 3 a.m. They would I'll show you where the kids go, at 3 a.m. to walk for water, to bring water back for their families. And they would walk, or sometimes on burros, they would walk for 9 hours to bring back water. They usually take their 8 or 9-year-old girls out of school. They go for water, come back at noon. And this would be the regular cycle of their lives. If a child was sick and they had to stay home, there would be no water in the house. But this is what their life is like. Next slide. It's gotten worse. Because of global climate change, some of these women are now leaving at 11 p.m. the night before, walking up to 13 hours to bring water for their families. They take the kids, they They leave them in this kind of little hut where they sleep overnight, usually cared for by an elderly man while the women walk for water. 13 hours a day walking for water. Next slide. And there they are picking up water. Next slide. When they find water, this is what the water looks like. This is what they would drink. And here they are gathering their drinking water. Next slide. Again, you can see what the water looks like when they have water at all. This is their drinking water. This is what they have to drink. Next slide. As I said, because of the 4-year drought in Kenya and Tanzania, hundreds of thousands of cattle have died. And for the Maasai, all their wealth is measured in cattle. It's even in the Maasai constitution. And this was a death sentence for hundreds of thousands of Maasai people throughout Kenya and Tanzania. And because this is an Indian presentation, I have not shown you my hundreds of pictures of dead cows. Next slide. And I'm trying to see the whole screen here. So I'm trying to pull this over. Hold on a minute. I want to see the whole thing here. I don't want to see the gallery. There we go. So what's happening with climate change? I mean, you're experiencing it in India. There's less rain, generally speaking. I know the monsoon this year was 13% lower than the previous year. There are more concentrated rainy seasons, resulting in floods. You've seen floods. There are longer dry seasons. The rain, even when they have the same amount of rain, it's concentrated in fewer months. The water table is lower so that wells are no longer effective. We see that in India. Madurai is my favorite example of that. Rivers, streams, ponds, and lakes are drying up all over India. People are leaving entire communities, their communities where they lived for hundreds of years behind, to find a place where they can have enough water. Next slide. So this is what you see as a result of climate change. Destruction of family and community life, forced migrations. Girls especially are taken out of schools to walk for water. There's more waterborne illnesses. As the ponds get smaller, bacteria, viruses, and parasites are more concentrated in smaller water bodies. We're seeing diseases in India, for example, that we haven't seen much of in 20 years as a result of this now. Deforestation, building materials are becoming more difficult, more scarce. Cooking fires become more difficult. There's less fodder for cattle, and cattle are dying. And because women are walking for water, there are increased rapes and sexual assaults. We see in India, we see in Africa. Well, you should see this chart. This is what I would call the elements of Swaraj, the village republic, seen from the point of view of water. What are the things that the village needs in order to sustain themselves that relate to water? And you'll see water security, sustainable food, safe cooking, clean water, better building, good hygiene, and improved sanitation. This is a view of Swaraj from the point of view of water. Next slide. But as much as I'm going to talk about technologies today, it's really about community self-reliance and self-determination. It's really about Swaraj. And all my work is directed in that direction. I just use water as the avenue to get there. Next slide. We have these 7 water solutions. I'm going to be talking about some of them today. I'm not going to read them to you because you're going to be learning about them. But these are the 7 technologies we work with in communities. Next slide. But here's the important part. The most important technology we bring is social technology. And we do if you wanted to activate Swaraj, you have to figure out how you are going to engage your community. So first of all, you have to tell people you're not going to be there for 1 month. You're going to be there for 3 to 5 years. We do what is called appreciative inquiry. Everyone brings something to the process. Everyone brings something to the table. We do what is called asset-based community development. We tell people, don't bring us your problems. We know your problems. We've already done a community survey, as you'll see. Don't tell us what you need. Tell us what you personally bring to the table. And we've had some very interesting things. For example, we've had a halal butcher come and say, well, you think all I do is slaughter meat for Muslims, but I know how to do food sanitation. And we've had one person who said, well, I'm the village rainmaker, and I bring rain to the community. And a widow with 7 children said, I know how to raise children well. Everyone brings something to the table, and we want to make sure that the entire community knows what that is. The leadership is collectively chosen. The community chooses and prioritizes technologies. And then we have a sustainability plan for each technology. This is very important. We've seen NGOs come and go. They drop things on communities and they disappear. We're not going away. And each technology has to have a sustainability plan. I'm always telling people who want to plant trees, and I'm saying, don't plant trees. I've seen so many failed tree plantation camps over 50 years. Sustain the trees you have. What's your plan to sustain the trees you have? We do heavy monitoring, evaluation, and follow-up, and we have lots of celebrations. Next slide. What it looks like. We begin with, once we're invited into a community, and we don't go any place that we're not invited. We do an epidemiological survey and a community survey. We identify community assets, the leadership, and the untapped potential within the community. And then over a 5-day period, we have a 3-day community engagement. And what we give people, so the first instruction is leave your politics and religion at the door. We don't care about that. We tell political leaders, you can come, but you're not a politician when you come here, and you have no party. And if you can't give that up, please don't come. You can come cut ribbons later. We use an appreciative inquiry approach. We identify challenges, we prioritize interventions, we organize intervention, the people choose their own leadership, which is almost never the political leadership. We set implementation and sustainability. We've had some interesting times with this. It's one community I remember where the village chief thought he'd come for 15 minutes and he ended up staying for 3 days. And he said to us, I've been village chief for 17 years. I've had all kinds of NGOs come and drop stuff on us. You are the first people who have ever come who have asked us what we want. Not what you have, but what we want. And frankly, if Friendly Water doesn't have what they want, we will tell them and we will try to find them what it is they think they need. We then do a training with each technology, which is usually 3 to 5 days long, and they will choose their own community coach. Again, follow-up evaluation, move to the next technology and celebrate. And it's a 3 to 5 year process. But again, I want to make it clear that the goal here is Gram Swaraj. The technologies are great and you're going to see some of them, but the goal is self-reliance and self-determination. Next slide. So this is a community called Matsaha in Western Kenya. Their average income is about $1.50 US per day. It's a very, very poor community. And this was after the end of a community engagement we did in that community. I thought you should see some of the people. Next slide. So I'm going to start with this one, and you'll see why I'm starting here as we go. I'm starting with building better, and we use something called interlocking stabilized soil bricks. And if you look at bricks in India or anywhere else, you find that the bricks are inconsistent in size and strength. There's a huge cost for mortar and cement, getting higher in India very rapidly. The bricks are transported long distances, fueling pollution. Worse, bricks are fired utilizing increasingly scarce wood resources, leading to desertification. There are no semi-skilled employment opportunities in the community. And as you know, in India, traditional brick kilns often operate on slavery and near slavery. This is the problem we're seeking to solve. Next slide. This is Tamil Nadu. This is a brick kiln prepared by slaves in Tamil Nadu. You'll notice that some of the bricks are burnt, some of the bricks are fine, some of the bricks are broken, some of the bricks will never stand up, some of them will come apart, but basically they take scarce wood resources and burn the bricks for up to 3 days in hope of getting bricks, which they will then transport long distances to where they're supposed to come. This is a non-sustainable practice. Next slide. These are some of the Maasai women I spoke to you about, and they needed to produce bricks for reasons you will see later. And we have a very, very, very simple machine. It uses the subsoil called marram in Africa, a subsoil, a little bit of cement and a little bit of sand, and it used compression, and these bricks are stronger than traditional bricks. They will last longer than traditional bricks. They don't break. Next slide. This is what the bricks look like. And you'll notice the ridges on the top of those bricks. These bricks fit together like, I don't know if you have Legos in India? I think you do. They fit together like Legos. And so one fits into another. It means you need almost no mortar or cement to build with. Next slide. So we were in Zambia, and this community came to us, and they were 2 hours away from the nearest road. And they said to us, we have a problem. What's the problem? We have no school. 50 kids get together twice a week, sit under a tree when it's not raining, and that's school. We want a school, but the government has said to us, unless you have a school building and 2 houses for the school teachers, we'll send you school teachers, but you have to have houses for them. So we need a school. So they came to us and we said, well, we don't build schools. You build schools, but we'll show you how. So this is a woman carrying one of the bricks they were making. Next slide. We trained masons, and we had a design for the school. The masons from the community itself, no one from the outside, built the school using these interlocking bricks. You'll notice there's no mortar between these bricks. Next slide. Here he is working on the school building. By the way, many of our masons are women. You'll see some of them later. Next slide. This is what they built. It took them 5 months. They built it every brick themselves, from local materials, not the materials not brought from the outside. This school now has 450 children. They also use the building as a community center, and they built 2 houses for the school teachers, and they now have 2 permanent school teachers. They're 2 hours from the nearest road. And this is what the community was able to do for themselves. Next slide. This is Friendly Water headquarters in Uganda. Beautiful, beautiful building. And you can see the bricks fitting together, built also with the interlocking bricks. Next slide. And now we're building desiccating latrines, again, using the interlocking brick technology. Next slide. I knew you wanted to know, what does it all have to do with water? Well, the first thing it had to do with water is we're not cutting down trees in order to make the bricks, but there's more. Next slide. So here's the problem to be solved, the long walk for water. As I said, this walk can be as long as 13 hours long, massive numbers of women's hours spent retrieving water. Children are taken out of school, rapes and sexual assaults. Children leave school during part of the day to retrieve water. There's no water or sanitation at the school, leading to disease spread. There's little water to wash with before meals or after latrine use. And finally, groundwater, borehole water is contaminated. And we see this all over India. Next slide. So these are a group of girls at a school in Western Kenya. They're about to leave their school to walk between 2 and 4 hours to retrieve water for the school. This is what there's a group of girls or boys, usually girls, will go out to retrieve water for their school and for their families. So instead of being in the classroom, this is where they are. Next slide. If you can make straight bricks, like the ones I showed you, you can make curved bricks. We modify our little machines a little bit so that we make these curved bricks. And with these bricks, we make 20, when I say we, I want to note that I don't make a thing. The local community is making all of these things. We make enough bricks. We need about 1,100 bricks to build a 25,000 liter rainwater catchment system. We built 60 of them this year. We're building 50 more right now. We hope to build many more. Continue. Next slide. This is the machine that's making the bricks. I'm sorry, I have a picture of the men doing this because it's actually often the women that are doing this. But this is what it takes to make the bricks. 3 people can make 450 to 500 bricks a day. No electricity required, no special equipment other than this simple machine required. They will make 450 bricks a day. Next slide. So our rainwater catchment looks like this. 25, it'll hold up to 25,000 liters of water. It'll refill again and again during the rainy season. You can see how very wonderful it is. You see there's no mortar. Now we will put a coating of waterproof cement on the outside and the inside when we're done, but I wanted you to see what it looks like raw. Community does this themselves. In Kenya, we have a patent on this technology. There are other ways to make these, but ours uses fewer bricks and fewer resources. Next slide. So often we attach them to a school because we take the runoff water from the school roofs to fill the catchments. And the schools also become a community gathering place for where the water will come from. And here they are setting the foundation. Next slide. Here they are building the catchment wall up. MYDG stands for the Matsaha Community Development Group, which is in that community where I told you people make $1.50 a day. Everyone who works on our projects gets paid. Every brick maker, we even had 2 women who were disabled. They couldn't make bricks, they couldn't build catchments, but we have to cure the bricks for 30 days and they need to be watered. So these 2 women have a job walking up and down the rows, watering the bricks every day, and they're paid for that because we want to bring money back into the community rather than taking it out. Next slide. So here's one that's just being finished. The head of our programs there is in blue, Eric. He told me he was going to fly. No, they had just finished this catchment at a local school. Next slide. Here's what a finished catchment will look like. This is an oddity. There's a foundation called the Mars Foundation. Very strangely, this foundation usually supports equine therapy, horse therapy for disabled children in Washington, D.C. But for some reason, they found us and started funding rainwater catchment systems. Each one of these catchments costs about $2,200 US, of which $600 goes specifically to labor, because again, we want to put money back into the community. Next slide. Michelle. So this girl was elected, 12 years old, was elected president of her class. Nobody told her before she got elected that one of her jobs was to find the water carriers every day. And she complained, and her parents complained, she no longer had any friends. And she didn't have any friends because all she seemed to be doing was appointing people to go carry water. She was very, very unhappy. Well, she's now, I wish I had a smiling picture. She's now very happy. She's very friendly. There are my dogs going. She's very friendly. Now, there are technologies in India. We have worked, I've been in the Rajasthan desert, the Tar Desert, and they make a form of catchment here in Rajasthan. In this part of Rajasthan, they get about 8 to 10 inches of rain a year, and they only get it for about 8 to 12 months, about 3 weeks every year. And the problem that I was there to solve was how to clean the water once they had captured it, that I'm not going to talk about today. But next slide. Next slide, please. So Friendly Water sent a team from Madhya Pradesh and other places, Lidwin is in there from Tamil Nadu, to learn how they made the catchments. And we're thinking, and we're going to hopefully try this out early next year, we could make these semi-underground catchments as well using the interlocking bricks. That'll make them stronger. It also makes it possible for them to be larger. It'll use less in the way of resources, and people won't have to be scrounging for rocks all over the place. And so this is Ajmat Khan, who's going to be leading our projects in Madhya Pradesh. Next slide. So back in February, I was in Madhya Pradesh. I was visiting with the Baiga people in the hills above Umaria. You probably know as much about Baiga people as I do, but very wonderful people known for medicinal innovations. They're famous as bone setters. And I came to honor a woman who during COVID, nothing could go up the hills during COVID, which was good because they didn't get COVID, but they didn't have enough food. And so she started a community kitchen for their entire community that ran for, I think, 18 months, where they gathered roots and whatever they could from the countryside and kept a community kitchen going for 18 months. So I went to honor her. It was quite a trip for me at any rate. And we're hoping to start some work with the Baiga people probably early next year. Next slide. Again, Baiga people from Madhya Pradesh. Now, the sad thing you see among these very proud and wonderful people is because of climate change, their water resources are very stressed, and more of them are becoming migrant laborers. And if you go to the train platforms in Madhya Pradesh, you see the train platforms filled with migrant laborers going all over the country. You all remember the horrible train accident that happened about 4 months ago in India. And most of the people killed, I'm told, were in fact migrant workers, tribal people who were on the train to go to find some work. Next slide. So and there is the woman I am honoring. And you'll notice the purple umbrella. The purple umbrella stands for, the purple umbrella covers all. That's what it stands for. And I give out, when I run around the world, I always carry a supply of purple umbrellas to honor people who've done work, wonderful work in their own communities. So here I am honoring the woman, the Baiga woman who'd started that community kitchen. Next slide. Oh, well, there's another problem. There are so many problems, but climate change is leading to shorter growing seasons. There is water lacking for plants in dry season. There's lots of malnutrition. Malnutrition is increasing in India very rapidly. Malnutrition statistics, and frankly, I have to tell you, I don't believe government statistics often from the Indian government, and I have good reason. We could have a whole show on that. but malnutrition in India is among the worst in Asia now. It's gotten much worse in recent years. Elderly people can't work in the fields any longer. The puddles around their homes breed mosquitoes, leading to malaria and dengue fever. And the economic payoff for working in fields is unsustainable. Again, I was in the area around Wardha, Maharashtra in February, where again, you have the large spate of farmer suicides, people selling off their land. It's unsustainable, and they're becoming essentially slave labor to the people who are buying their land. They borrow money and they can't pay it back. You know the story as well as I do. So we want to solve this problem. Next slide. So there's a very simple technology. And by the way, I can send you a 13-point a 13-point program of how to do this very easily right next to your house. Basically, you find a puddle, you find the places where the mosquitoes are breeding, and then you take an area, usually close to the house. 4 meters by 4 meters is large enough, 10 meters by 10 meters, no larger than 10 meters by 10 meters. And you begin to work. Next slide. So basically what you do is you dig up, say, 18 inches of soil, not only the topsoil, but the soil under it. And you mix it heavily with compost and manure that has been dried, and you mix it all up. And before you put it back on, you make little channels under what will be the garden, with holes on each side of the garden where those puddles were. And the water will stream underground so that you'll be building an underground water tank. The result of that is that you will get vegetation growing all year round, even in the dry season, because the water will maintain itself underground and you'll be growing vegetables all year round. Next slide. So this is what it looks like when they're preparing it. Next slide. We often have fences made of moringa. Here they decided to make another kind of fence, but this is what a permagarden would look like. And we really wanted to test this, actually test to make sure that this technology worked well. So continue, next slide. So I had a friend named Peter Otiende, a very simple school teacher. And he was sent to a new school in an area of Western Kenya that had a great drought. And his school had 300 families. 95% of the kids were hungry at school, 95% of them. So he began building permagardens. I love the technology of permagardens. It requires exactly one piece of advanced technology, a shovel. That's it, a shovel and then some knowledge. He trained families to make these permagardens. He discovered that in 1 year, the cost of food per family declined by 45%. Hunger at the school was entirely eliminated. And some of the saved funds went into a rainwater catchment, and now he's planting all kinds of fruit trees around the permagardens. And they're spreading all over the place. Again, the only technology you needed is a shovel and to know how to do it. Next slide. So in Western Kenya, we decided to bring together our 3 groups of masons from the 3 different communities we were working with. We wanted to make sure they all had proper protective equipment, which they were very proud of. They all wanted to wear it in the pictures. Next slide, please. Here are the teams, and you'll notice the women are in the front because they are the leaders of the program. They are the people making the catchments. They're the leaders of the program making the catchments in the bricks. Next slide. How do we evaluate our success? Well, we want to know if the program helps fulfill our mission. We want to know if the program is community-led and community-driven. It's not us. It's not people from the West, from the global North coming. They have to do it themselves. We've had failures, and that's to be expected. Community has to take it on from themselves. It was very funny, a little funny story. We had one community. We did the 5-day community engagement. It looked tremendously successful. We brought 12 people to be masons and brick builders to a central location to learn the technique, to learn how to do everything. And then for 2-3 weeks, nothing happened. And we provided the machines. And we said, what happened? And they said, oh, we were waiting for a check. They thought we were there to dispense money because that's what all NGOs do. We said, no, we already gave you everything we're giving you. Now it's up to you. And now they're working fine. But it was literally, that was their understanding of the way things are supposed to work. If there's no money changing hands, chances are that, they're not supposed to do anything. And that's what they had been trained to do by their governments and by NGOs, and sometimes, sadly, by Gandhians. That all the innovation has to come from the outside. Everything has to come from the inside. And finally, we always ask, are the program outputs and outcomes sustainable? As I said, when we don't work in that many communities because we're trying to provide models. So we will be in each community from between 3 and 5 years. We're not just flying in. I have funny stories about solar cookers in Gujarat. I was there in the 70s when the solar cookers came the first time. The people hated them. The women said, what, you want us to make dinner at breakfast time when we're trying to get the kids off to school? We have to get our husband off, and then we have to go to work. We're not going to make dinner at breakfast time. So the solar cookers disappeared. Around 2007, the solar cookers came back, and one woman says, oh, solar cooker. She said, come to my house. She dived under her bed. And she said, here, I have 4 of them. Now I have some good results with solar cookers too, but I'm not going to talk about those now. But again, it's the sort of thing that happens when you're not really engaged in your community. Next slide. Now for something completely different. And I said to Randhir, I had something that I had been working on with David Willis. This is a program, a new program. It's not Friendly Water, but it grew out of Friendly Water that I'm very excited about. I've discovered over time that when working in communities around the world, the single most important factor is leadership, leadership, and leadership. Has nothing. If you have leadership and no money, you can do great things. If you have lots of money and no leadership, you can't do anything. So we said, we continue to find community partners who are doing great work, but it then happens that something happens in their life and they have to leave off their work. Their wife or their husband gets sick and they have to pay a hospital bill and they can no longer do their work. The beans failed and they need to find some money to send their kid to school. Things of that kind. Usually it's a little amount of money, but you want to keep your people working in the field. And I've discovered this all over the world. So the most important thing is to find a way to provide for the personal needs of the people that are continuing to work in the field. And so we set up a little nonprofit called Good for Good, and it's really tiny. We provide limited financial assistance and technical support to community partners engaged in community assistance, community development, environmental restoration, and public health work around the world. We don't provide any project funding. This is not about projects. Now, sometimes somebody will say, I'd like to go explore trying this new idea, and we'll provide some, and we do provide some money. I have some good examples of that. You cannot apply for funds from Good for Good. There's no application procedure. Our board is made up of people who've worked around the world for a total of probably 100 years. We know people everywhere. Partners are nominated by board members, and you can't apply. You get selected by the board members themselves. And finally, we have no online presence. No one comes begging to us for money because they don't know we exist. And we don't plan to be online anytime soon. Next slide. So this, you can read this for yourself, but basically this gives you an idea of what we're trying to do. And Randhir, David Willis is a board member of this as well. And my wife is the administrator. Next slide. In the US, we're a 501c3 organization. It's easy to form in the US. We're actually encouraging people not to come to us, but to form their own. We think we could have 10 good for goods. 20, who knows? We do accept, we fund it mostly ourselves. And we do accept funding from others, which is tax exempt in the United States, but we decide where the funds are going to go. The partners are selected by the board. You cannot nominate a partner from the outside. It doesn't work that way. I'm very excited about Good for Good because, again, I've run into this problems over my last 50 years again and again, where people trying to do really good work in communities with people who just don't have the basic resources for their survival and growth. And sometimes very small amounts of money can make a big difference. I'll give you at least one example. I have a friend in the Congo, does extraordinary work with orphans and war orphans from the war. And his wife had a terrible health problem. She was fainting all the time. She looked like epilepsy. Then they decided she had a heart problem. And this went on for 3 or 4 years. Now, I worked in public health for 22 years. I said, I'm not a doctor. I said, send me all this stuff. And he sent me all the medical reports. And it quickly became clear to me and others, she didn't have a heart problem at all. She had a particular kind of larvae like trichinosis, a larvae which inhabits the brain. The larvae die in the brain, but it hollows out spaces in the brain. Easily cured. For $125, I got her diagnosed and treatment, and in 3 weeks, she was totally well and going on to do fantastic work with us. She's been well now for about 3 years. I actually spoke to her on Friday, and she's doing work with women with babies, very poor women with babies who are just getting out of health clinics. And again, because some of the board members had some medical knowledge, and because we had this tiny, tiny little amount of money, we were able to heal her family, and so she could go on to do good work. Next slide. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I'm open to questions. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. It was really very, very insightful and very inspiring presentation, I would say. Now I request respected participant to share their reflections. Maybe we can initiate with Professor Gyan, or he is taking some time. Maybe Ananta bhai.
Thank you. Thank you, David, for your sharing. So many instances, but this community invitation, you say that you do not go to a community unless you are invited. Can you kindly elaborate a bit? Because that means that the community has to know about you.
You're right, right.
How does
Well,
that happen?
Well, first of all, you should know that we don't work in that many communities. Number one. Number two, I have 50 years of work around the world. People know me. But they'll have a particular problem that they'll come to me with. And sometimes it means there's need for work from us. And sometimes they just need some advice. We don't advertise. We have way more invitations than we could ever possibly fill. And the first question I will ask, as I said in the talk, I won't ask what your problem is. I want to know what you can do. What are the assets that you bring to this? Now, you can all make a laundry list of problems. You can go from the global, you can look at the health data from around the world down to the local. We know what the problems are. If we did a brainstorming session with all the people on this call, you could come up with a better list than I could of all the problems that exist within Indian society, within any society. We know that already. We don't need to know about the problems. We want to know what the community brings to the process. What are the assets you bring? Have you looked at the assets within your community? Not to the government. We're not at all interested in the government. If the government wants to come and cut ribbons, that's fine with us. We don't care about the government at all. We hope that if they stay out of our way, we're quite happy. We have had some government assistance, and notably, for example, with the patent on the rainwater catchment we did in Kenya, that was necessary. We don't care about the government. We don't care about the political leaders. One of the nice things about working in the Baiga community, first of all, they're barely Hindu. They're not Muslim. They're not Christian. There are no religious conflicts. They don't vote. So the political parties don't come to campaign and hand out stuff because there's nothing to gain there. It's a wonderful place to work. There's no politics. There's essentially no religion that we have to worry about. There are no roads. There's no infrastructure to campaign to get the government to build their infrastructure. No, it's just people. To me, that's the perfect community to work in.
Thank you, David. Now I request Indu ji, who is nurturing Chetna Foundation, to share some of her reflection.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, you are audible. Please share.
Okay. Yeah, it was great listening to David, and we came to know how you're working, and I really like the method in which you're working as to how the community can bring their own assets and resolve the issues. So we too are trying to work on other issues. Recently, we have started working on malnutrition in Bastar. So I think, yeah. So I think the water, the kind of solutions you can, help us out with, we can take up water issues also in our area, and definitely, yeah, work on these issues. And I would really like to know more about the work which you are doing in your communities. And it was great to hear that you have been working with Baigas also. I too have worked with Baiga communities, but the issue was different. So yes, thanks, David, for sharing your insights and the work you have been doing till date. And I really appreciate the method which you are using to resolve the issues.
Well, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, Induji. May I invite Minati Pradhan ji to share some of her reflections?
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, David Albert, for his very insightful presentation. So, as they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words. When you look at the presentation pictures, even in fact, I had seen before also that one of his other presentation, the pictures, you feel the plight of thing. Every drop of water, the people who are privileged and wasting, how costly it can be to, I mean, to those people who are that drinking water in Kenya. Pictures were very heart-wrenching, I must say. Yeah, thank you so much for the method you are using. But what I feel is, it has to reach the means every level of the grassroots level. I mean, the work you are doing probably through this type of webinars and other platforms, it should reach people, so that more organizations come up and do the work and get involved with you. So that is what I just wanted to share.
Well,
So,
we're just trying to provide, thank you so much. We're just trying to provide a models. We've been talking. So I tell people I've been trying to build the Village Republic for 50 years and have failed for 50 years. I haven't built a single Village Republic. But but during that 50 years, I have learned enough to think I know the major things that need to happen if you wanted to build a Village Republic. And
now,
that's
actually,
what
I wanted to.
Sorry,
sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to share. Now, in fact, now where the groundwater has gone completely contaminated, we feel this problem. I mean, that the social problem it brings, and with the water problem, it is rampant everywhere. In fact, last 1 month, I have been watching some media. There is in Odisha, there are so many problems regarding water. People are complaining that muddy water is coming out from the hand pump, and things are happening like this. How they're wasting the time, not able to do anything else, and it is not remain now a particular region's problem. It has become now widespread. So we have to collectively think something to resolve this problem. And thank you so much for teaching us, these methods and for this webinar. Thank you.
Well, you've seen that we don't do wells. We don't do wells. I've seen the wells in Karnataka that are bringing up arsenic, killing children. We've seen the water problems, people digging massive numbers of wells, and essentially they're stealing water from each other. Then you have shallow wells, which are contaminated, bringing disease to communities. We don't do wells. We understand where people feel they need to have them. That's fine, but we don't do them. We think the gods have given us rain. All we need to do is to figure out how to capture it and to make good use of it. And so that's what we've been doing. So I bless all the well drillers who are trying to do good work. That's not work that we do.
Ananta bhai want to share some more thought. Yes, Ananta bhai.
Yes. So thank you again. And as David, you are emphasizing on leadership, and very important, but what is your vision or thought about leadership? Let me just submit that the very idea of the leader, so it has multiple roots in modernity. As you are also a student of political theory, that, so the very vision of leader as it is related to power and politics, but not necessarily linked to what can be called as the natural rhythm. And so how do we develop what can be called as a bio-regional leadership? A friend of mine has developed that model.
That's a wonderful question. That's a wonderful.
If I may, that to that also we need to bring our soul dimension, because the soul dimension is very, very important in our life, and modernity has forgotten that. Maybe the indigenous people that we are working, the soul is animate, So this is the first query. Secondly, about these processes, there is a poetics of life, and because it is not just technology. So what kind of work you do to foster poetics of life in terms of leadership, in terms of social struggle?
Wonderful, wonderful questions. First of all, I see that my son Inamul Hassan has joined me here.
Very good.
Good to see him. I know he's a very busy person. By the way, Inamul Hassan is one of our partners in the Good for Good program, because I have to keep him on the trains, working where he works. So the thing to be said there is, India is cursed with politics. But virtually everywhere the British went is cursed with politics. And, you know, politics are a way of extracting wealth from communities and providing it to higher community, to lower, what I would call lower communities, those who have money on top. That's essentially the process of politics. If you come from the global north, you quickly learn that you can't figure out who the leaders in the community really are, because if you're from the global north and you go into community, you gravitate to the person who speaks English the best and is the loudest. And you quickly find that that's not a good approach. That the communities themselves have to put leaders forward. More than 50% of the time they will be women, has been our experience, because they're more in tune to the needs, specifically the needs of the family and the community. The men are out making money, you know, as best they can, sometimes with great difficulty. So that's the first thing that needs to be said. So they usually emerge in our 5-day engagement process. New leaders will emerge, and we've sometimes had conflict with the political people who try to take over, and they say, you know, where are the leaders? And we say, no. In this group, you are simply a person like anybody else. Very, very difficult. But we invite the political leaders to come and cut ribbons to start things and whatever. And if they want to provide some funds, that's okay. We don't mind. But the leadership has to emerge within the context of community. It can often be spiritual leadership, or people who in Western Kenya, there are a lot of Quakers. And so often people who are leaderships in their local churches will often be the leaders. But because we work in communities that are so poor, other than votes, the politicians have nothing that they can get out of those communities. It's wonderful to work in a place where there's nothing that a politician can exploit. Now in India, that's more difficult because politicians try to exploit each and every opportunity they can find. We understand that. And if I had the magic crystal ball to cure that, I would tell you what it is. Maybe Inamul can do a better job than I can on that front, but I don't have a way to cure that. But I do know that if you want to build a village republic, you have to start with the village. So I don't work, as people know, I don't work with many academics. They're welcome to come help, but I don't work with many academics. I was telling Randhir before we began, my university is my house, which by the way has a sign on it that says Shanti Niketan, because when we homeschooled the kids, we named our house Shanti Niketan. That's my university. I don't teach at universities. I usually turn down engagements. I get lots of invitations. I turn down engagements at universities because I don't simply want to be the entertainment. Usually if I give a university lecture, I'm simply the entertainment for the day. Not interested, very rare that I will do that. You just have to find another kind of what I would call servant leadership. And if you can find the servant leadership in community, the community knows who the servant leaders are.
Thank you so much. Now with this word, I request Minati Pradhan to offer a vote of thanks for this beautiful and creative and transformative presentation by David Albert.
Thank you. On behalf of Sadhya Sahachakra and Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, I, Minati Pradhan, would like to thank our today's chief speaker, David Albert, for his very insightful and enriching presentation. Thank you, sir. And I would also...
Hello, Minati, please put your video on, David. It would be nice for David to see.
Yeah, I'm visible, I believe. I am. No.
Yes, yes.
I thank Madam Induji from the Chetana Foundation for being present with us and sharing some of her work. And thank you, ma'am, for being with us. I also would like to thank Professor Ganluji, MD Chandar Sahab, and all the participants in our Zoom platform and in our Facebook platform. Thank you all. Please pardon me if I have forgotten anybody's name, but I thank all of you and thank you all. Good night.